So again, we are starting with values, goals, and priorities. This is the foundation. And these three, kind of like in math, really rely on each other. So as we talk about values, values-based goals come next. And prioritized goals happen thereafter. What are values? Why are they so important? Why do we need to talk about this when we're looking at a time management system? Well, I'm going to answer those for you right now. So let's get to this presentation here without any further ado. So productivity in and of itself is a myth without direction and accountability. Direction is this first part. Accountability is the last part. Everything in between is the productivity system. In order to have a solid direction, it's vital to understand your own values. I define values, and interestingly enough, so do financial planning literature. Since we have financial planners here today, values are principles that you believe to be true. But in this case, about you. Most who are doing really good financial planning are building this in values. You're taking what it is that you value and explaining it to someone else, or trying to uncover what their values are to build a financial plan. Well, that's because goals are based on these values. A principle, for example, might be, I believe in honesty, okay, or being trustworthy. That's a principle. Values and principles, they're becoming less and less sought after in our society, but I think there's a pendulum swinging where I think there's a movement of coming back to these values and principles. And I'm part of bringing that forward. I want to be there to help people to remember their values and remember their principles. Values also give you the internal motivation that's needed to achieve your future goals. I just got off a coaching call with a couple, and we talked about all of their values. They wrote them down. They have them. I have them repeat those to themselves every day as internal motivator. Otherwise, most of the time we get motivation from going to hear motivational speakers or music or somebody who's, cheerleading for us, whatever it is. That motivation comes in spurts, and that's external. And it's good. You need to have that once in a while. But internal motivation is what is going to help you every single day to stay motivated, to stay consistent. And this is a rhetorical question, but you're welcome to comment. But have you felt ever that, like, man, I just wished I was more consistent. I wish that I had better internal motivation. It's likely because you don't have your values identified. So how do you discover these? How do you, as an individual, come up with these values? I've spent years researching and evaluating and working in personal development. Started with Dale Carnegie and others, that Nightingale Conant, Brian Tracy, a lot of these big names I'm sure you've heard of in the sales field. I used to even work for some of them. The E-Myth, there's just a lot of great books and content out there that talk about values. But no one really knows, where these come from or how to discover them, and everybody has their different view of it. In fact, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Brian Tracy. Have you ever heard of Brian Tracy? Okay. He's big on values. He doesn't call them values. He calls it clarity. He has a whole course on clarity. And he focuses in on, when you have clear goals and values, that'll give your life clarity. I had a financial advisor client of mine who had been in the industry for about 25 years and wanted to retire in 5 years. And he didn't even have values that he could identify and tell me that were his internal values until we went through this exercise. Okay. So pay attention to this next part, because you'll begin to understand where I'm going with this. Part of my research, I did a psychology degree and a degree in human development, and we looked at all these different theorists. So here's the theory behind it. This is by far and large the best theorist I've ever come up with or discovered in human development. His name is Erik Erikson. Erik Erikson is a Danish-German developmental psychologist. He believes that we develop over time, that we're not just stagnant individuals. And he came up with 8 different stages of our development. And you can see here, there's trust and mistrust as the first, area. As an infant, we get into, trusting others or not trusting. And then there's autonomy and shame and doubt. As a toddler, you begin to move out on your own and see the world, and you start to be having your own autonomous interactions. Eventually, as a preschooler, grade schooler kind of initiative, getting out there and doing your own thing and being industrious versus guilt and inferiority. What happens, what Erikson said, is that as we move through these stages, if we don't choose one, we kind of get thrust to the bottom. Like if we don't choose trust, then we default to mistrust. If we don't choose autonomy, then we get thrust to shame and doubt. And a lot of people, you just think about this, even some of your clients or friends or church members deal with shame all the time. In fact, shame becomes a motivator if we're not careful. So does doubt and guilt. And people have inferiority complexes. If they make it through grade school and they don't get beat up and they don't take that so personal, they maybe turn to be an industrious person. But here's the kicker. Here is the crux of Erik Erikson's entire theory, and that's this stage right here. And this is the teenage phase. And you guys know this, having had teenagers, probably worked with teenagers, that if they don't develop a real good sense of their own identity as a teenager, then the rest of their life, they're struggling to find out who they really are and really act on that identity. Okay, so that is the key to the entire theory. Now let's fast forward. Intimacy and isolation, this is marriage stage, middle adulthood, generativity versus stagnation, kind of developing as a middle-aged adult. Now this last stage is what I'm getting to. Integrity versus despair. At the end of your life, as you're looking back and you're looking at the things that have happened and what you're doing to, or what you've done, what you've accomplished, and really who you've become, you start to battle between despair about, did I do enough? Did I live up to what I was supposed to be doing? Or integrity, feeling that I did it. I really was able to do my best here. I'm going to sneeze. It's coming. All right, I think I'm okay. That sneeze was teasing me. Anyway, so I've thought about this and I've researched this, and I found that most people at the end of their life, if they feel like they've really lived an amazing life, they will have this experience that will show up in their obituary. And you'll see this in obituaries. Obituaries kind of show the brightest parts of their life, the happiest things, the things that they really value, and really who that person has become. Sometimes obituaries are laden with accomplishments, but true life sketches or obituaries oftentimes showcase the type of person that you are. Now, let me ask you this. Jeff, Lynn, Eddie, and anyone can answer this. You can unmute yourself and talk about this. Have you ever written your own obituary? Anybody have an experience with this? Anybody have written their own obituary?
I have not written my own obituary.
Eddie, have you written an obituary for someone else?
No, but I think that would be a great honor.
Yeah. Thank you. Jeff, Lynn, have you had experiences here? So I'll tell you,
No,
Mom.
really. I did help write my dad's obituary a few years ago. He passed away, so but it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
Yeah. Was that tough to do? Was that a difficult experience?
Uh, well, I don't know if it's tough. I think you want to decide do some key highlights that kind of talk about how they were as a person versus, like you say, versus their accomplishments. I think that's more important.
Great. Well, thank you. So I've done this literally for hundreds of people, and I call this the mini obituary exercise. If you have your OneDrive open the mini obituary worksheet. It will look like this. And as we're going through and I explain why we're going to do this and how we're going to do this, I want you just to focus on one or two categories. I believe, and I've researched and done and conducted this, and it helped, hundreds of people do this actual exercise. I believe that life has 10 areas. All other areas of life will fall into these 10 areas somehow, okay? And they are career, personal finances or family finances, your physical health, which may include emotional health as well, spiritual health, self-improvement or personal development, right? Fun and recreation, relationship with spouse, relationship with immediate family or extended family, relationship with others, friends, and relationship with the community. Now you can define those in your mind how you'd like, okay? But these are the 10 areas. And we're going to spend a great deal of time in this first part of the live event going through these 10 areas. What this will eventually do is give us a broad view of everything in your life. Now, looking back on your life, how often do you get a chance to write your own obituary? My father passed away at a very young age, and this left such an impression on me. I was 26. I'm the oldest son. I was, responsible kid that came to help mom deal with all of this. It was a very sudden death, not expected at all, and caught us all off guard 100%. So I, as a young financial advisor, I went ahead and helped mom, paid off the house, organized their finances, got her on a budget, paid off her cars, buried dad, bought the plot, I just did everything for mom. I was right there with her. And one of the responsibilities I also had was to write the obituary in between all of this, taking care of everything while I was grieving. And it was really a horrible time. But it made me a better person. And I realized that as I was writing this obituary, could I say these things I'm writing about my father? Would other people say them about me? I internalized it so much that it completely changed my life. It changed my life so much that I realized I wanted to be these things. I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to have a big family. I wanted to do my own business. I wanted to do all of these things in life that I wasn't doing. And so I wrote my own obituary. And the reason why I want you guys to do this is because I believe it will give you the opportunity to really reflect and refine and come up with your values. You see, from your values is what you'll build your goals on. So if we look at this worksheet, this is how you'll do it. And I'll give you a few minutes to get working on this. You could sit down and write a real long obituary, but we don't have time for that today. What we have time for is probably take one or two of these areas and to complete them and then move on and come back to this at a later date. But what we have is, let's just say you have your career or even finances. What you want to ask yourself is, in whatever area of life that you choose, what would you want someone to say about you?